Okay, letter 9 continues this theme of tzedakah. And again, more than it being a specific sort of appeal that is focused on contributing material or even time, or whatever, I think it's much more about creating an awareness that we should be consumed with being of service. And it's one of the big pushbacks that Tanya has in its own time, and certainly in our time. I mean, we live in a world, and again, I'm not talking about horrific greed and some sort of comic book level of selfishness. It's just the essential premise of my existence that we're trying to overcome. Not that I don't exist, it's that my existence is important because of how it is able to bring to others. So you got, the total Ayn Rand on one side of the equation that says it's all about what's in it for me, and altruism and selflessness is foolish and harsh and so on. And Torah is about, can we be consumed with something outside of ourselves? I mean, this week's Parsha just gives a very clear illustration of this, that we know the beginning of the Parsha is that Hashem makes it extra hot because he's hoping to sort of give Abraham a day off. He's recovering from the bris milah, and Hashem wants to make his life a little easier. So he says, he changes the whole of atmospheric circumstance to make it super hot so that he won't be bothered. But what's Abraham's response? He becomes irritated that he doesn't have anyone to show kindness to. So on the one hand, you say, well, what does this mean? That Hashem made a mistake? That Hashem made it extra hot because he thought he was helping Abraham, and instead he's only being annoying to Abraham? Of course not. The idea is that when Hashem shows kindness, this should spur us to a greater kindness. So Avram is eager to do kindness. And again, there's a level, of course, there's the grotesque level where a person just looks around and says, what can I get out of every circumstance? The Alter Rebbe has too much respect for his readership to imagine that he has to counter that. That seems incredibly obvious, and therefore we're not even going to discuss it. The challenge that is worthy of discussion is when a person says, well, sure, if somebody needs help, I'm here to help. That is, in response to a need, I am prompted. And what Avram shows us in this story is that he's got an innate desire to be helpful, not just in response. So again, when we're talking about, again, the specifics is about tzedakah, and we'll get into that detail, there's an overarching message that the Alter Rebbe is trying to cultivate within the readership, which is to be fixated on the infinite of Hashem, not just in response to what is my obligation. So he begins this letter differently than he begins the other letters, and in a much more sort of personalized form. And he writes here, Ahuve, my beloved ones, Ache, my brethren, Rei, which are my friends, Asher Kenafshi, who are like my very soul. So the Alter Rebbe is using these terms of such special endearment, as opposed to, let's say, in the previous letter, where he begins with a quote and then begins the more familiar style of analyzing every word and nuance and meaning of each word. Here, he begins already with a tone setter of this particular kind of warmth of expression between himself and his readership. And this emphasizes a number of levels. And again, maybe I'm overly cynical. There is that sense that, he's trying to set me up for something here. So the Alter Rebbe, by beginning the letter with these terms of expression of how dear he holds the readership, he's emphasizing that he's not here to try and take advantage of a person or try to get something. He's here in this most personal and concern for the donor as much as it is about the concerns for the beneficiaries of it. And again, there's a potential for cynicism there that the Alter Rebbe is overriding. So by referring to the people as ahuve, those who I love, it evokes their love for him. Achai, my brethren, that I am, as we have talked about this so many times, that the Alter Rebbe aligns himself with the people. And Re'ai, which is translated as friends or neighbors, is the same as the verse of love your neighbor, v'hafta l'reyecha kamoicha, which is asher kanafshi, that are like my very soul. So it's a reach out to them at their very basic identity. Ba'asi, I come kemaskio ma'orer, to not only remind you, but also to motivate you. Now, we know that some people, we just need a reminder, but other people need something more than just a reminder. We need an inspiration. Why do we need that? Yesheni b'tarbeimos havle havolim, because we are often asleep in the slumber of Hevle Havolim. Now, Hevle Havolim is a quote from the book of Koheles, called in English Ecclesiastes, where Shlomo HaMelech begins and he says, Hevel, Hevel, Akol Hevel Havolim. It is all Hevel, Hevel, Hevel Havolim. Okay, what does the word Hevel mean? Now, I don't know what specific translation they have in the different interpretations, but it runs the gamut from hot air, that is a classic one, that it means air. It's often translated as vanities or fancies. Curiously, Hevel is the name of a well-known character in Torah, who is the brother of Cain, who kills Hevel. And perhaps this is why Hevel, the word, came to be associated with that which is temporary and fleeting, much as the original person whose name was Hevel was temporary and fleeting. There is no offspring, there is no legacy of Hevel. Hevel is killed by Cain, game over. There's no more story associated with it other than the momentary episode that results in his being murdered by his brother. So when the Alter Rebbe says Hevel Havolim, it certainly calls to mind the beginning of the book of Koheles, and Shlomo HaMelech is sort of at the end of his life, recounting to his kingdom that all of the material items that he has accumulated, which again, he's Shlomo HaMelech, he had a pretty peaceful tenure as king. There weren't any wars. He built the Beis HaMikdash. He built his palace. And as his name Shlomo comes from the word for peace, he lived during a pretty peaceful time. And of course, he had all of the material things one could ever aspire to. And he's saying, Hakol Hevel. It's all Hevel. Why is it Hevel? Because it's fleeting. It's here and then it's gone. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. What could happen? People can be put to sleep. That is, their neshama is numbed because they are so engaged in the pursuits of this physical world. The tardemos hevli havolim. It puts the person to sleep. It's the lethargy of the pursuit of the material. Because again, if we think about it in our modern illustration, and it's probably always been the same, what is the point of all of the working and accumulating and so on? Is to get to a point where I don't have to. You know, this sort of image where I'm going to work so hard that I won't have to do anything. And I'll just be able to sit around in my sweatpants all day and eat peanut butter out of the jar. And wouldn't that just be grand? So again, for a person who has fallen into this slumber, it's not enough kemaskir, as the line says, but it also has to be ma'orer. They need a prompting. They need something to stimulate them to get out of where they are. And to open the eyes of those who are blind. And again, it's easy to be smug and to say, those people. But again, we have to look within ourselves. Where do we find that we are stumbling around blindly? What does it mean to stumble around blindly? That we're just acting out of instinct and just acting out of impulse. And impulses and instincts are not bad. It's important that we overemphasize that the alternative to what the Alter Rebbe is recommending here is not evil. The Alter Rebbe's audience is not consumed with evil. It's simply consumed with impulsive behavior. So a person thinks it, feels it, does it. And again, it's not bad things, but it is hevel havolim. It is simply in the pursuit of self, just like an animal. Animals don't do bad things. Animals simply do impulsive things. They care for their young, they eat, and so on. They don't do bad things. However, it is not our aspiration simply to be, quote, an animal, to act out of our impulses as virtuous and as beneficial as those impulses are. And again, I know that it's easy to gloat and say, well, how's someone supposed to know? You grow up in a world, let's say in our Western American society, every form of authority tells you that the goal in life is to be good and go to school and get an education and get a job and make money. And what about family and a community and something? Yeah, if the right one comes around, if I have some, meaning the priority, and then they wake up with a big oopsie. And then they say, well, how was I supposed to know? I did everything they told me to do. I did what they told me to do, and I got a big whoopsie. I want to have that, and again, what happens, we know about the loneliness and the isolation, all of the mental health issues that our society has. And this is who the Alter Rebbe is trying to remedy. And, are you telling me that if I keep Shabbos, then I will? Well, A, yes, but B, it's not just about doing it. It's about changing your mentality. Well, what do you mean? Instead of trying to reorient ourselves around what can I be contributing to, and look, it could happen even within a frum person too, right? I want to learn Torah so that I'll do well, I'll be a mensch, I'll be knowledgeable, and not bad things. Again, it's not bad things. It's just directed at self. And this is what it means to be blind. God forbid if a person is blind, if a person's in total darkness, they simply act out of instinct. And again, that's not evil. Yabitu lirois, that they should look out and see. Liois, and this is it, that what we are striving for, called Yisha v'chafetzim b'gamta. This is it, that their desire, their longing, their passion should be lakol behem chaye rucha b'makar mayim chayim achayim kol yemei chayeya minefesh v'ad. We are trying to turn around that our passion should be the life of all life, the life-giving waters, the source of all life. This is what we're talking about, from the soul down to the flesh. So these terms, mayim chayim, which we translate as the living waters, which is a reference, it's got a halachic ramification as well. It's a reference to a flowing stream as opposed to a stagnant pond. That's mayim chayim. Kabbalistically, this is a reference to the method through which Hashem expresses himself. Dibor, speech, Hashem creates, Hashem said, let there be. So it's a mechanism of expression. And the malchus level of within Atzilus, remember the stages of the expression of godliness, what we call the four worlds, which is a method through which God tones down his overexpression to allow us to have some identity. And the malchus level within the Atzilus is the communication from point to point, from stage of awareness to tempered stage of awareness. So the malchus of Atzilus is this mayim chayim, it's this life-giving water. And this is where we want it directed. In the back of the Kahas Tehillim, there are some brief stories. I don't know if they're translated in English, but in the original Hebrew. And there's a classic one that's often quoted, where the student comes home and he learned Hasidus. And they say what did you learn about, what did it teach you? So it says, it taught me that there's a God. So he says, even the local peasant Gentile knows that. So they call in this peasant, and it's a longer story, but they say to him, is there a God? Yes. So then he starts to point out the difference. He says, tell me, what did you do today? I woke up, and what did you do? I went to work. Why did you go to work? So I could have money. Why do you need money? So I could eat. Why do you need to eat? So I can go to work. Why do you need to go to work? So I can have money, so I can eat. And again, it's an overly simplified story. And again, it is the essence of the Western mentality, and that this is the whole message of America. You picture the kid in that first day of high school. You got to work hard to do well in school, to go to a good college, to go to a good graduate school. And again, these are not innately bad things. In order to make money, in order to have a house and a car and food, in order to retire, in order to do nothing all day. That is to take care of self. And again, it's not evil. It's simply driven out of instinct. And the message of Tanya is that we are not beholden to our instincts. We have a godly soul that drives us to connect with something far greater than simply our instincts. And this is what we wanted to do, to be that type of objective, so that kol mili de alma, the iske parnasa, our whole involvement in the world and our engagement in our parnasa, lo yeh ki'ilu de'od ligarmayu, should not simply be as those who work for themselves. What is the purpose of it? Now, in the secular world, we talk about meaningful work. And again, it's not a bad thing. And a person goes to work and it becomes something meaningful for them. Good. But the meaning should be not in the work. It is in what is the purpose. What is that ultimate value? And again, it's very difficult. And this is the revolutionary message of Hasidus, we would say of Torah. And again, unfortunately, if we don't go down this path, we often wind up with a big whoopsie, where a person turns around at a certain point in their life and they go, why am I doing this again? Like, what is the purpose of all of this? Especially that very few people actually ever attain that material largesse that they were in pursuit of. When they were 20 and they thought they're going to be bazillionaires, and now they're 60 and they're not bazillionaires, and they don't have community, and they don't have purpose, meaning, family, and so on. So, oops, what do I got? And again, it's a very sad thing. And as I often point out, it's like the dentist says that all hockey players have no teeth. Well, of course, you're getting a skewed sampling of the society. So maybe I get a skewed sampling of society. Who's coming to rabbis at age 60 is the people who are unhappy, not the people who are happy, and so on. But I unfortunately suspect that is more demonstrative of the masses than otherwise. And they can't figure out what they did wrong. I don't know. I did everything they told me to do. But again, this was the point. It was simply ligarmehu, for their own purpose. Now, again, that is not a grotesque sense of all they ever did was think about themselves and so on. But remember, from way back in the end of the first chapter of Sefer Shel Beinanim, where the Alter Rebbe talks about that the human instinct, even when they do beneficial things, is still because of some way that it reflects back on them, some joy that it brings them. And that's still going to be tethered to their identity. Look what it says. It's almost, we wish like we shouldn't be this. Halavai, we were this. Do not be like those who serve mounds, which is a derogatory term, not that we have any laudatory terms for idol worshipers, who sustain and care for and cherish their wife and children out of love. You say, what's so bad about that? Well, we almost wish we would do that. Why? Because that is still driven by the sense of instinct. It's not sanctified. So it's the person saying, I want to do that, so I will do it. And what about if I don't want to do it? Well, then I don't have to do it. So it is this driving force that I should be in the service of Hashem in all I'm doing, particularly in my engagement in the material world. I have a little bit of a pet peeve, and it's very easy for me because I'm in the rabbi business, but I have a little pet peeve with people who use one name in shul and a different name that they make up. So the kid's born and he's named Shlomi. He lives his whole life as Shlomi. Then he gets a job on Wall Street and he decided that his name is Beauregard because he doesn't want to be Shlomi on Wall Street. But Wall Street needs more Shlomis than it needs more silver speculators. That's what it needs. It needs the Kedusha. And this is the particular emphasis of where we can bring that Kedusha. Now, again, it's easy for me to say because I don't live in that world. And when I show up there, everyone sort of expects for me to be doing the rabbi thing. That's the double down challenge that the Alter Rebbe is laying out for us. Now, curiously, when the Alter Rebbe says that the house of Israel should not be like those who serve the mounds, like mounds of rocks, which again is a derogatory term. Now, again, there's many terms that you could have used. What is the Alter Rebbe potentially or possibly alluding to by specifically referring to us as the house of Israel, not the Bnei Yisrael, which is a little bit more of a common phrase, or even Am Yisrael? And why is he referring to them as those who serve the mounds, not those who serve strange gods? Again, there's a lot of other terms. So perhaps this is the point, because the Alter Rebbe is referencing, and we're going to be leading into the description or the contrast of how a person cares for his very own family. Again, which we would say, well, that's the most sacred thing. Even that needs to be sanctified and done out of the service of Hashem. What is the pushback of the Oivdei Galilim? Because the Galilim, which again is a derogatory term, it means like a mound of rocks, as opposed to some glamorous statue that's all polished and beautiful looking. The mound of rocks is essentially all forms of idolatry. As we discussed, the classic, timely Torah readings, when Abraham smashes the idols, everyone's familiar with the story, right? So his family comes home and he tells them, well, the biggest idol. So how come they're still idol worshipers? I mean, so what's their response to that? So their response is, Abraham, you don't understand. We're not looking at these idols for some sort of meaning and purpose. We're looking at them as some sort of service that they provide. I mean, my analogy is we used to have a Palm Pilot. We traded in our Palm Pilot for a BlackBerry. We traded in our BlackBerry for an iPhone. And then one day we'll trade in our iPhone for the next thing. And what will happen to all that Commodore 64 and fax machine and so on? They wind up in the garbage. So why are you getting it now? Because right now it works for me. They're saying, Avram, you don't understand. You're telling us about a creator God. That's not what we're looking for. I just want to know, who do I have to pay and my kids will be healthy? What do I have to do and my crops will grow? That's all I care about. I'm not looking for some meaningful, transcendent relationship. I'm just looking to whom do I have to pay homage? To whom do I have to pay a tax? To whom do I have to say yes, please, and thank you? And then I'll get my degree and I'll never have to talk. But it's going to wind up in a heap. So what? Right now, it gets me what I need. I move on, and the past is irrelevant to me, and its collapse is meaningless to me. So this is the Alter Rebbe's explanation. A person is impulsively driven to serve all of these items that are going to collapse, and we're trying to take an infinite look. So this is the Alter Rebbe's point. Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. So the Alter Rebbe says, what is the contrast? This is a pasuk from Chronicles Divrei Hayamim 1721, if you want to look it up, that says, who is there like the people Israel, a nation that is one in the land? What does it mean, in the land? Where else would we be? It brings to mind that quote from Ecclesiastes, King Solomon Koheles, where he talks about there's nothing new under the sun. Well, where else would it be? And we explain, right, there is something above the sun that is spiritual. There can be new things. Here as well, when the Alter Rebbe quotes, or the meaning of the pasuk that says, who is there like the people Israel, one nation in the land? Again, where else would they be? And that's the point. It has to be in the land that they are special. And this is the constant dispute, the story of Haman and Achashverosh, where it's analogized to a person with a mound of dirt and a person with a ditch. The mound of dirt suggests, what are you doing bothering us? You shut up and pray. Stay there in holy things. This is the real world. Down here, this is how we do it. You go to shul, you want to pray, you want to do that. Don't bring it into this world. There's a story told of a few Hasidim who had a business together. And one guy's job was to keep the books. So after he would make the accounting of the whole week, what they bought, what they sold, the profit, the loss, and so on, he would conclude on the bottom with a quote from Tehillim, LaHashem ha'aretzu mulay. Everything belongs to God. So they said to him, what are you doing? So he says, what do you mean? During davening, I think about business. So why can't I think about Hashem during business? The message being, this is the distinctive characteristic. It's not just about the davening, or we might even say it's not even primarily about how I behave on Yom Kippur, or how I am in sanctified circumstances. It is about how I am in my behavior. Look, we know the alternative. Unfortunately, we have numerous examples where you have somebody who's a very, very good davener. He daven. And then he goes out to work and, will scratch your eyes out. And then he comes back and daven. It's very embarrassing. Now, of course, we know people who are ethical, but don't daven. So it's not like some people are good at man-God. Some people are good at man-man. Our objective is to be both and not to use one to excuse the other. I know I don't daven, but I give a lot of tzedakah, or I'm very nice to my neighbor, or I know I'm not nice to my neighbor, but I learn Torah a lot. Neither one should be used as an excuse for the other. And this is the Alter Rebbe's message here, which is going to become the really demanding part, that when we are engaged in the most ethical aspects of our humanity, caring for others and so on, we have to be absolutely certain that it is conducted in a manner of sanctity, of holiness, transcendence, and selflessness. And that's the challenge here. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says, the Hainu, what is it that we are emphasizing with this phrase? Who is there amongst the nations like Israel? One nation in the land. The Hainu Shagamin Yani Odetz, even in earthly matters, Lo Yafridu, we should not be separated from Hashem. So it would seem to be attractive. And again, this essentially comes down to the whole thematic distinction between the message of Hasidus and other philosophies in Torah. And again, I illustrated with a exaggerated metaphor. If tomorrow we win the lottery, $100 billion zillion, we have two choices. One is we take everybody, we go to the moon, we build a gigantic base medrash, and everybody sits and studies Torah all day. That's one philosophy. That is, we only are engaged in the world because we have no choice. The other is, now we build Chabad houses for the whole world. So there's two ways of viewing our engagement in worldly matters. One is, it's basically a nuisance, that since we got kicked out of Gan Eden and we weren't allowed to stay in the wilderness forever or in the ark, So we got to come into this physical world. We need it. That's it. You need to buy groceries. You need to buy svarim. So you go to work. But that's not part of my service of Hashem. That's a nuisance that I have to put up with. The alternative is, this is not only another opportunity to serve Hashem, this is the primary opportunity to serve Hashem. And this is really where it comes down to it. What do we say is the primary opportunity to serve Hashem? Is it by separating ourselves from the worldly behaviors, or by transforming the worldly behaviors? And again, it's not one to the exclusion of the other. Because, of course, if I don't energize up on the godliness in the service of Hashem, I have no capacity to transform the world. But if I only gin up on the service of Hashem in the evidently godly circumstances, and I don't implement them in the more worldly circumstances, then I've missed out that opportunity. It's as if I'm saying God is not in the bank. God is not in my business. God is not in my eating, drinking, sleeping, and so on. God isn't welcome there. Or I say, that's dir b'tachtenim, which again, to us, it's just the water we swim in. But remember, that medrash, nobody ever heard of that medrash until the Alter Rebbe brought it to our attention. So it's not the driving philosophy of many other segments of our Torah awareness community. So the Alter Rebbe comes back here and he says, Lo yafridu mi echad ha'emes chas v'sholom lo hoyit eid sheker chas v'sholom b'kriya shema erev v'boker beinayim skudais Hashem echad b'dal ruchais u'b'shemayim mimal u'ba'aretz mitachas u'b'kuach einei ha'ivri hisayif einecha boi v'einenu chas v'sholom. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, do not separate it out. Do not live in separate worlds. Somebody I know was once asked to come and give a talk to some, I think it was college students or wherever it was, about being a Torah observant business person and living in both worlds. And he said, what do you think I should talk about? I said, I think you should decline the title. It's not two worlds. You serve Hashem in shul, you serve Hashem in your business. You're a servant of Hashem under all circumstances. It's not like we park our one identity and then put on a different mask in a different identity. This is truly who we are. And what is the Alter Rebbe sort of warning us? Do not allow yourself to fall prey to what is essentially going to be a false testimony. That is, when we say the Shema, we know that we cover our eyes. What is the goal of covering our eyes? Because we don't want to be distracted. As we say in the Shema, do not follow after your eyes. It's the donut test. Nobody wants donuts. Oh, there's donuts? I'll have a donut. Meaning they see it, now all of a sudden they want it, which is all of advertising. You didn't know about this thing. Now you were told about it. If you don't have it, you're miserable. So we close our eyes. When our eyes are closed, it is simpler to declare that there is nothing else in my life that determines my behavior other than Hashem. That's because my eyes are closed and I don't see either the oncoming attack of Gashmias or the allure of material things. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. When we want to, our goal is Hashem Echad under all circumstances. As you are familiar, that the word Echad is Aleph, the oneness of Hashem, is in the Ches, which is the 8th letter of the Aleph base, which represents the world just like it is in the 7 stages of heavenly awareness. And this extends to every circumstance as illustrated by the Dalid, the 4th letter of the Aleph base, which represents the 4 directions, or in other words, every aspect of my every being. There is no place where God is not welcome. Don't bother me, and so forth. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying, that we do not want to be saying something and then we don't mean it. Every morning when we close our eyes, we declare it. And then what happens? We open our eyes and, hey, donuts, we get distracted. So this is what the Alter Rebbe continues. Our goal is that we should be consumed with not what is in it for me, but rather how can I serve Hashem? And how can I bring more godliness into the world? That's true in davening. That's true in Torah study. That's true in mowing the lawn and going to work and balancing my checkbook and whatever it is. And in a certain way, on the contrary, that's the more profound level. So it's not just, wow, you're working, you might as well bring godliness there. On the contrary, this is why Hashem has set it up that way, that we are compelled into a world full of activities in order to bring the godliness into those circumstances. What then is the purpose of going to work? Why is it that I have to do all of this stuff? It is to give life to these godly souls and their godliness, and to fill in that which they are missing for pure benefit, for quote unquote no good reason. Because as long as I'm doing a kindness for somebody for some good reason, so then it's because it's been justified to me. So there is a sort of mentality that says that I have to go to work because I need money to buy mezuzahs. But then the mezuzah is still mine. It's still about it's still about a mind. Can I get myself to that kind of conscious awareness where I don't see it as mine? In Hayom Yom it says, the Chassidim would say, this piece of bread is yours like it's mine. They did the yours first and then the mine. This type of awareness, or Hillel would say, I'm going to feed my stranger when he would go to eat. Not just because he was detached, but he was showing you how enthusiastic you should be to provide for another person. So can a person develop a passion for godliness? That it should be completely for the service of Hashem. It's a very difficult, lofty level. There's a certain sense of pride. I was able to get it done. This was my success, and so on and so forth. And again, the question is, what does that lead me to? Does it lead me to want to do more, or does it lead me to a little resting on my accomplishments? So this is the Alter Rebbe's point. When we do this, we are able to reflect that level of godliness. Our neshama becomes one with its source, like we have in the idea of the chelik elaka mimal mamish. This point that the Alter Rebbe makes in the beginning of the second chapter of the Sefer Shel Beinim, that describes that we are not only human beings. We are not simply a composite of the next stage up in development beyond the animals. That we have this capacity to override our nature. And that's really the miraculous quality, that we can do more than simply act out of impulse, not because those impulses are evil or bad and so on, because they are still tethered to my self-awareness. And we're trying to get beyond that level of self-awareness. In fact, in that quote, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the chelik elakal, the portion of God, the way it's embedded within our human experience, still comes from that level of mimal that is outside of ourselves, like we talk about our neshama not being entirely encased within our humanity, that there is something that drives us beyond our humanity, and that is in the very essence of Hashem himself. And that is truly godly behavior when there is a total selflessness. That complete selflessness, which how do you know when you have it? Well, that's a trick question. If you think you have it, you don't. The point is we don't think about it, we act that way. And we've hopefully all encountered people who are so intuitively kind that they have almost a reflexive, or not almost, a reflexive sense of jumping in to be helpful, as opposed to the reasonable thing, which is to back up from something that's dangerous. They go forward to be assisting in that. And it's just intuitive within them. And probably if I think it's me, it's probably not. So, a quick thought. The Rebbe spoke so much about the importance of having children and having many children, and so on, and the importance of mothering, and so on. So the teachers in Beis Rivka, when they heard this, they said, well, maybe we shouldn't be teaching in school. We should just stay home with our kids. So they asked the Rebbe, they wrote to the Rebbe, is this the message that we should just be home with our own children? The Rebbe said something to the effect of, and why are the children in the school less important than your own children? Meaning you should raise them as your own. That's a very high level. It's a very, very lofty level. But this is what we are aspiring to. Can we have this kind of lofty level where we see everybody as the same? The Tanya continues. Hashem echad, asher chesed el kol hayom, chesed shel emes. That Hashem is continuously expressing this limitless giving. I'm sure I've shared this story before, but you're too polite to remind me. So this mashpia was once invited to a certain city, not Chicago, and he farbranged for the Bachrim. And at the end of the Farbrengen, when things took on a little bit more serious tone and everybody was a little more self-analytical, one of the Bachrim asked him, what should you do if you feel like your entire relationship with Hashem is one-sided? And he didn't really have a good answer. It sort of knocked him back for a moment. The next night, he was invited to Farbreng with the girls in that school. And at the end of the Farbreng, he decided to bring them this question. So he said, I was asked this question, what should you do if you feel like your entire relationship with Hashem is one-sided? And before he could speculate or offer, a girl blurted out, yeah, look at all Hashem does for us. He gives us existence and life and sustenance and so on. What do? We daven, we this, we give a little attention. So she completely turned it around. So whereas a person may have a tendency to think that my service of Hashem is one-sided and how come I didn't get what I want, she's saying we got to reorient our mentality. Look what Hashem does for us. And this is that point. And we should emulate God to be as giving without expectation and to be continuously giving. Look, even the fact that Hashem made this covenant that he would never destroy the world again in the rainbow and so forth, which suggests that there were times when he wanted to destroy the world, but he didn't destroy the world. So Hashem is continuously giving, even if I don't like it. And again, are we continuously giving? Now, again, we're not only talking about financially, but in all forms, friendship, warmth, hospitality, our time, our efforts, etc., even with the less than glamorous circumstances. Who's going to make time for that? That's the Rebbe, makes time for that person, for the less than glamorous circumstance. Okay. That Hashem makes the world exist at every single moment. So if so, this would seem to suggest that I shouldn't treat my kids any different than anybody else's kids. And yet we find something odd. If a person pays for somebody else's kid to go to yeshiva, we say, wow, that's tzedakah. If he pays for his own kid to go to yeshiva, we don't think that's tzedakah. Why? Because that's your kid and your responsibility, and that other kid is not your kid, it's not your responsibility. What is the difference? The difference is the halachic difference. And this is the point. Rak, she'ishtoi ubandav shal adam kaidem l'chol al pi ha'Torah. Torah made this requirement. Torah insisted that you have responsibility to your family before anybody else. So halacha requires that I care for my family. Now, again, we're not simply talking about the dollars and cents and how I allocate. We're trying to reframe the mentality. Do I say, okay, here's 10, 20% of my income to tzedakah? Or do we say that my mentality is to be giving? That's my mentality. And therefore, I have to restrain myself to 10 to 20%. There's a curious halacha, I must have mentioned this before, that if, God forbid, a child is orphaned, so the Bezdin, the court, appoints an apitrupis, a guardian. And this guardian, as you can imagine, is watched very carefully, exactly how he spends any of the estate of these orphans, even if they could be wealthy. So what things does he buy them? What things does he not buy them? Does he buy them a lulav and esrog? Does he buy them new clothing? And again, it's going to be watched depending on the circumstance and what was the standard, et cetera, et cetera. So we find the general rule that any mitzvah that has a fixed cost, like buying a lulav and esrog, he should do. And something that doesn't, he shouldn't. And then it talks about, what about tzedakah? So the basic argument, or the basic halacha is, no, he does not give tzedakah. Why not? Because a kid's intuition is to give it all away. The kid gets $2,000 for his bar mitzvah. He found out that there's some kid who genuinely is impoverished to give it away. Because the kid thinks, well, I don't need money. What do I need money for? My parents take care of everything. So unfortunately, you have to be the wet blanket and tell the kid, no, you can't give away all your money. But this is the mentality we want, not I'll give 10 to 20%. We have the mentality that I have to restrain myself to only give 20%. My impulse is to be more giving and more giving and more giving. There's an old story told, it's maybe even a true story, about the poor man comes to the rabbi and the rabbi gives him his silver. So the wife says, you gave away the silver. You know, that silver is very valuable. So he runs down, he finds the guy and he says, that silver is very valuable. Make sure you get a good price for it. You know, we sort of want to change our mentality to not how much do I have to, but how much should I not? What's the restraint?
Rabbi Epstein,
At your service.
How does one temper for your child that? Like, how does one, because, you know, I can attest that is very true what you just said.
Yeah, of course.
And like to the point where it's like, you know, nothing left it could be. But how does one maintain that mentality for a child, but yet teach them that, you know, they have to have their own still?
Right, because you're also a Jew and you also have responsibilities and you also need tefillin and you also need clothes and you also need shoes and so on. And you're also not always going to be 16 for the rest of your life. So, you know, it's a little bit, you know, it's an ironic thing. We know how the world perceives it, you know, that women are oppressed. But I can tell you in the high school, they teach these girls basic home economics because tell you what, your husband is not learning this. You know, he has no idea how to balance a checkbook. He has no idea how to pay his credit card bills. He's going to be in yeshiva his whole life. You're going to get married. You've been working 2-3 years and so on. And you know much more about how to handle finances than he does. He has no idea. Yeah, it's a challenge, but I guess a part of it is just like any other challenge, like teaching a kid how to drive. The kid figures you get in the car, you drive. It looks easy. And then, you know, God forbid, it's not so easy. So there has to be some reality of gullus that, you know, we have budgeting and we have to understand. And in a certain sense, that's really the compliance of tzedakah, because it's borders on thoughtless to say, well, just give it all away. You know, there needs to be responsibility taken, where it's given, how it's given, and so on. So it's part of an overall life education about understanding that unfortunately there's limitations as long as we live in gullus. That's the best I could do, but and at the same time, not squashing that beautiful drive to just be completely selfless and give it all away and it's okay. I'll sleep on the floor and eat, you know, canned beans for the rest of my life because what do I care? Yeah, it's hard. Okay.
It gets even harder when the Rebbe is quoted every single time.
Of course, right. Yeah, I mean, Baruch Hashem, you know, that's why you don't want to squash that side of it. Yeah. So here a little background. After the Maggid passed away, the Maggid of Mizrich, who was the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, so Rav Menachem Mendel Haradoka and Avram Kaliska, who were two great Hasidim, they decided, it was in 1777, I have my notes here, took 300 Hasidim, and they moved to Eretz Yisrael in Sfas. And at that time, it was under the Ottoman Empire in Syria and so on. In 1783, they were forced out of Tzfas, you know, and moved to Tveria. And they built a shul in Tveria, in 1786, and it's amongst the ancient shuls that still exist in Tveria. The Rambam is buried in Tveria, and so on. So as we know, Kollel Chabad, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with today, didn't start 2 years ago, didn't start 70 years ago. It started 250 years ago. And this is a tzedakah built by the Alter Rebbe, and to help these Hasidim. Just a quick story. Rabbi Mendel Duchman runs the Kollel Chabad now, and the Rebbe was very, very involved in a lot of the things of Kollel Chabad. Just as an example, we know that before we go to the oil, you give tzedakah. Where does the Rebbe give tzedakah? Kollel Chabad. In fact, just one cute anecdotal story. So the Rebbe was very meticulous in the bookkeeping and so on, and everything was totally above board and square and CPA compliant and so on. Rabbi Krinsky tells a story that the Rebbe once asked him to buy something, and when the Rebbe asked him for the receipt, it said tax exempt. So he said to Rabbi Krinsky, "Why didn't we pay the tax?" So the Rabbi Krinsky says, "Well, America is linyan chinuch, we're tax exempt." So the Rebbe said, "No, this is from me personally. Please go back, if you don't mind, and return it and pay for it with the tax, because this is not something I'm purchasing for the community, it's for me personally." So this type of thing. So the Rebbe always wanted a receipt. So how do you write a receipt to the Rebbe? So Rabbi Duchman writes, as we would say in Hebrew, Kvei Kedusha Sadmur. So the Rebbe says, I don't think the IRS will accept this tax receipt. Anyway, so everything that they did when Rabbi Duchman took over Kollel Chabad, they sent into the Rebbe, including it was notes for an outline for a meeting. They were making a meeting like some sort of board meeting, and they had notes. And the Rebbe said, first of all, you have to have a Baruch Hashem. And the Rebbe says, you didn't even mention that the Alter Rebbe started this. This is notes. This is not some sort of formal stationery. The notes have to, everything has to say that the Alter Rebbe began the Kollel Chabad. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is writing now. He's asking for funds for Kollel Chabad, and he's tying it together, because right after supporting your family comes supporting Eretz Yisrael. Again, my beloved, my brothers. Put your heart, so to speak, to what I've told you about here. Again, this is going to be an appeal for Memel Vitebsker and Aaron Kaliska that came to Haradok, and then from Haradok they went to Svas. They didn't go El Al nonstop, in business class. This was some real rough stuff. And when they got there, it was pretty rough as well. There wasn't Aliyah foundations and so on. It was really real tough stuff. So the Alter Rebbe says, we'll speak, because being in the face of the Rebbe itself enriches this thing. And this is another one of those things that really gets people, annoyed. This is the point that the Alter Rebbe is saying our avodah now is in actual mitzvahs. The example here being tzedakah. And this is the Chabad thing. Are you Jewish? Yes, do a mitzvah. What about learning? Of course, nobody's against it. Nobody's denying it. But this is the Ikar Avodah of our time, is to make the physical world a place that's welcoming for God. Kavashkos Razal, like the Rambam writes in the laws of gifts to the poor, and he uses this exclusionary phrase, Ein Yisrael Nagolin Elibitzdaka. There's no other way we're going to be redeemed, we're getting out of Golus, except through tzedakah. What about, we say it every morning in the davening, that Torah study? What about Torah study? The Alter Rebbe says something pretty radical here. He says, the Yemeim, that was in the times of the Talmud. They needed to establish scholarship. That was their avodah, Torah study. The Frierdiker Rebbe came to America. What did we need? We needed schools. There were no schools. There were no yeshivas. Our Rebbe, what did we need? We needed the Chabad houses, what we call the outreach to people disaffected and disconnected. You have to do what the times call for. Simchas Torah, you dance, and Yom Kippur, you fast. Why? Because that's what's called for. That's why they were Tanoim, the authors of the Mishnah, and Amoraim, the authors of the Gemara. That's what was necessary to create a foundation of Jewish scholarship. However, now in the time of the heels of Mashiach, that the sukkah of King David, that is the Beis Hamikdash and so on, has fallen. And our Torah scholarship is not, nobody's comparing themselves today to Hillel and Shammai and Rava and Abai. Not that nobody's diminishing the value of Torah, of course, chas v'sholom. Ad bechinas raglayim v'akvayim. It's down to the foot soldiers. We have to do the legwork. She bechinas asiyah, which is our behavior. Ein derech ledavka ba be'emes lahafka cheshulchan hara delay. Kimi bechinas asiyah. The only way to be connected with Hashem is through action. That's what we have to do. We have to change the world through concerted behaviors. That is through behaviors of tzedakah. As we understand this, the scholars, what does it mean? The work that we do, the job, what does that mean? That means to bring this divine energy into the most non-naturally compliant aspects of existence. That is, down into the physical, tangible world. The lesle megarmeh klum, that has no self-awareness at all. That's our mission, to bring the light into the world. Anybody who slaughters his Yetzer Hara, u'poseich yodai, and opens up his hand, ulvavai, and his heart, laha iskapia sitra achra, to repress his sitra achra, u'mahape chashucha la'or, and turn around darkness into light. Hashem yisbarech, then Hashem Hashoichen Aleinu will dwell with him bebechinas asiyah, in his behaviors, vikvos mashicha, and again the heels. Even though, and again, the metaphor of heel is that it doesn't feel very sensitive to godliness. So sometimes when I'm doing quote unquote ordinary mitzvah stuff, it doesn't feel very godly. In contrast to when I am contemplating the infinity of scholarship and Torah study. Yet know ye that this is the crucial matter. The Yiska Lirois Ayin Ba'ayin B'Shuv Hashem Tzion Chula, we will thus merit to see Hashem eye to eye in the return of God, to Tzion, through our concentrated behavior of bringing Hashem into the most routine of routines. Even though it's like the heel and it doesn't feel very godly, do not underestimate its value. Now, back in chapter 7 or letter 7, the Tanya referenced the idea of each person having their own specific mitzvah that they're really excited about. Heavy Zohir Tfei, not to the exclusion of other mitzvahs, but this is the one. Well, this is true generationally as well. We have to, our generation needs to override the pursuit of the material with the pursuit of the spiritual. So, right, I mean, this is the broad shoulders of a Rebbe who says this is what a generation needs. That's a big step, because the default is to keep going with what you've been keep going with. And again, this becomes the call of the hour that is identified by the people who are willing to identify. There's a big risk there. So again, you can point to a lot of source material, and again, no one is suggesting Torah study should be ignored or not. It's again, where is the emphasis? What needs to be emphasized most profoundly? And in our day, it's about bringing the godliness into the physical, and it's about changing the mentality that is essentially what's in it for me, or how will this make my life more meaningful, beautiful, and so forth, into how can I be a provider of godliness into the physical world. All right.